Hello, everyone, and welcome. We will be getting started very soon with today's webinar on the book Up From Nothing, The Untold Story of How We All Succeed by John Hope Bryant. Welcome. We're so glad that you've decided to join us today. We look forward to learning with you today. As you're coming into today's event, I hope you'll take a moment to find the Zoom chat. We would love to hear from you in the chat, and we would invite you to use the drop-down menu to select all panelists and attendees so that you can communicate throughout today's event with the others who are listening and learning. Today, we are here with John Hope Bryant, and we will be getting started soon. But I hope you'll take a moment to say hello in the chat. I see that some of you are already doing that. We would love to hear from you. And throughout today's event, we would welcome you to post any questions or comments. And toward the end of today's session, we will be getting to some of those questions, as many as we are able. If you happen to be participating today with a group from your organization, we would love to give you a quick shout out, and we would invite you to share the name of your organization in the chat so that we can shout you out. Today's event is sponsored by Barrett Kohler Publishers, the publisher of John Hope Bryant's book, Up From Nothing. And we're so thrilled that they have made this learning opportunity possible. So welcome in North Carolina at the McDowell County Chamber of Commerce. And welcome to Gary, who's dealing with those fires in California. Thanks to many of you who are joining. I'm seeing some international attendees. I don't know, Doug O'Hara, if you're in Sydney, Australia. That's crazy. It's got to be the middle of the night. Welcome from Mindful Leadership. Welcome to those of you who are calling in from around the world. And we're so thrilled to have you with us today. In the event that you would like to choose to live tweet today's event to share your thoughts and ideas with others, we would invite you to use the hashtag #UpFromNothing so we can engage with you later on the topics of today's webinar. And so welcome to the Education for Engaged Citizens from Asheville, North Carolina. So John Hope Bryant, John, I hope you'll join me on camera. We're going to get started in just a moment. And I'm happy to introduce John Hope Bryant to you. John Hope Bryant is an American entrepreneur and author, a philanthropist, and a prominent thought leader on financial inclusion, economic empowerment, and financial dignity. Mr. Bryant is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Operation Hope, Inc., which is the largest nonprofit, best-in-class provider of financial literacy and economic empowerment services in the United States for youth and adults. John Hope Bryant is also the chairman and CEO of Bryant Group Ventures and the founder and principal of the Promise Homes Company, which is the largest minority-controlled owner of single-family rental homes in the U.S. He is one of the only best-selling authors on economics and business leadership in the world today who also happens to be African American. John Hope Bryant, welcome. So thrilled to have you here.
Honored to be with you. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm really interested to learn more about your book. Obviously, we had a previous event, maybe you were part of it, virtual launch party on the day the book came out. It was so exciting to see the number of people who have been impacted by the great work that you're doing in the world. So let's talk a little bit about this book. It's not your first book, and it comes at a really interesting time in history. And I'm curious why you wrote this book and who it's for.
I wrote the book because I think that America has forgotten its business plan. And the new business plan is really a foundational builder on the original one. I mean, we're built by immigrants, Polish immigrants, Italian immigrants, German immigrants, British immigrants, largely in early America. You name the group, Latin America, Middle East, Europe, Asia, the African continent when post-slavery, and even before slavery, you had Africans who came here with Spain who were free men and free women who were on the Spanish coast, and everybody got along just dandy. The word actually white was created in the early 1600s. It didn't exist anywhere else in the world. We created it here to separate economically and class-based the poor white indentured servants from the poor black indentured servants, and to segment out white wealthy and white poor as one group, so they wouldn't mix, so the two groups wouldn't mix. And I think that this has created a ridiculous battle and a ridiculous conversation in this country that we've obsessed on for 400 years. And I think it's hurt GDP, gross domestic product. It's hurt our prosperity. It's hurt our ability to rise up sustainably. It's created drama. We've got drama right now at scale in this country where people are focusing on what they're against. And you know, the Bible says a house divided cannot stand. It's biblical. It's also common sense. You know, you cannot have a car going in two directions. You cannot have a boat where you say you can take you can't take any pleasure. There's a hole in my end of our boat. I mean, it may seem emotionally satisfying, but rationally the boat's sinking. And you know, so I wrote this book for a time like this. I didn't know it was going to be this time when I wrote this book, but I had a sense, my post several years ago was that we were heading in the wrong direction. We were forgetting our business plan. Everybody wants to be an American around the world except Americans. And we were fighting with each other, throwing sticks at each other, throwing rocks at each other, arguing with each other. And there are other people around the world who want what we've got. They want our way of life. They want our standard of living. They want our freedom at scale. A couple countries in particular who love that we're in this family food fight. They want our seat at the table as the global leader in the world. So superpower, sole economic leader, et cetera. And only we can screw this up. And, you know, America used to be the light on the hill and the symbol for the world. Not a perfect country by any means, but we were for so long a symbol of hope and aspiration, which attracted all these immigrant groups to America, the only nation in the world with every race of people within its borders. I wanted to get the emotion out of it. I wanted us to have a little bit of a sense of humor. And so we laughed at ourselves, not at each other, but laugh at ourselves, learn to laugh at ourselves, not to be so dang on, take ourselves so seriously, and begin to build bridges of understanding with people who we may not necessarily think that we have a lot in common with, because we're better together. And to marry this moral thesis and this philosophical undergirding, almost a spiritual calling with a business case. In my business case, I lay out in this book is as much science and math. I love math because it does not have an opinion, to quote my friend Melody Hobson. This book is as much science and math and data and analytics and non-emotional focus on the green, US currency, as it is philosophy, moral standing, et cetera. I think, to answer your question, we're sitting in a moment in history. And I think this is what I call the third reconstruction in this country and a symbol for the world. And what we do now matters, all of us.
Yeah, I agree. So John, who do you hope will read the book?
Everybody. And I don't mean, it's sort of strange because it's a commercial book. You got to buy the thing typically to get it. So when I say I want everybody, it sounds like I'm trying to say, oh, we should go buy the book. You know, I wish I could find a foundation, somebody to buy the book at cost and I can give them away. I'm actually going to create a library program where folks can donate it to their local library, who I'm sure increasingly in this world, you can do digital checkouts, I guess, at that library. But I don't make money on books. I'm an entrepreneur. You know, this is what I earn on the 5-6 books I publish is a rounding error of my net worth. It costs me more to do it in time and energy than I would get it financially. But I can't find another way that's more effective to get thought leadership out at scale than a book. I've got 100 million plus video views, but those are fleeting. You got to watch that video, that moment, that time, and then you got to remember to go watch it again. I mean, content's flowing through your life. A book sits on your shelf, right? And it sits there and until the next time you pick it up. Books are static in that way. It's a lot of things that are a lot of things in life. If they get static, they get old. Meaning it's stale. Like if you have food in the cupboard and it stays static, then it's no longer good to eat after a period of time. Books are one of those rare things that actually, in some ways, get better with time. You know, the 1947 book by Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. You read that book today, it's as riveting and relevant today as it was in 1947 after the World War II. Scott Peck's books, The Road Less Traveled, 25 years old. My friend Deepak Chopra, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, which must be a decade or more old now. Timeless. I think this book is evergreen. I see it as timeless, and I want everybody to have it because I think for those who've read it so far and reviewed it, Black, white, rich, poor, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, they've all pretty much had the same reaction to it. Some of it's hard to take because it's blunt, but ultimately it's fair. And I hope it doesn't sound haughty. I'm repeating what people say, enlightening. That, in other words, a light came on in people's head in a different way. It might have been the same content inventory, but it was organized in a different way, gave a different narrative of our storyline, one that most people can accept without feeling aggrieved or assaulted or feeling having to feel guilty or feeling like you're letting somebody off the hook. You know, you got all these emotions tied up into our story. And I think this book does a good job of weaving it, no pun intended, weaving it.
Indeed. Well, so that's a great segue, John, because my next question is to ask you to share your Up From Nothing story with us. And I'm curious whether the people who have chosen to join today's event have heard the story or read the book or know about your background. If you already know John, just type yes in the chat so I can see it. And if John is brand new to you, type no. Either way, we're all excited to hear your story today. John, will you share it with us?
You know, and this is, by the way, the interesting aspect of writing a book, or not writing a book, the importance of writing books, even in this era. You know, when my mom and dad were growing up, you had 5 channels, I think it was, the major network channels. You had a few radio channels. And now you've got, 800 plus channels on cable alone, not including radio networks, blogs, digital networks, streaming channels. You have channels within channels, sub-channels. You got all this content coming at people. And I do interviews, media interviews several times a week. I just did one this morning, local WSB here in Atlanta. And it's amazing to me how people are like, oh, I'm just hearing this. And I've been at this for 28 years. You Google search my name, your computer will blow up on the level of engagement we've had all around the world. But it's not enough because people are busy and people live in silos. And so writing books and having them consumed and having people curl up with a cup of coffee or tea and in their little nook and reading it not only is necessary today, it is a unique moment of silence and where people are present still in this day. So my story is, I think, everybody's story. I grew up the result of, and I've never told this story before to anybody, but my grandfather was in all likelihood a slave. Certainly my great-grandfather was a slave. My grandfather was born in 1871, so slavery ended in 1865, but as we all know, it went on for some time illegally. And my grandfather at some point by 1940 owned a farm, so he was a businessman. And then my father was a businessman for 54 years, and I am a businessman, and I'm actually an entrepreneur, not just a businessman. These are software upgrades. Like I'm standing on tall shoulders. I didn't do this by myself. I didn't get here by myself. And my story also is informed by my mother, Juanita Smith, who was not told she was loved growing up. Her mother, my grandmother, I'm sure she meant well. And in some ways, this book, I commend her for the way she raised her children, because I'm about to say something not so great about my grandmother, by the way, but she wasn't very nice. But she loved my mother and her sisters. And the reason I know that was in Social Security had been created after my grandfather on my mother's side passed. So there was no Social Security to take care of the family. You were on your own. And the state of, I think it was either Mississippi. No. It was Missouri. The state of Missouri, or Missouri or Illinois, they said that the family had to be broken up. So 3 girls had to go to Mississippi and 2 girls had to go someplace else in order for them to take care of 1 or 2 of the members of the family. My grandmother said, no, we're not doing that. Everybody's going to have to work and we're going to stay together. Now for that, I commend my grandmother. But she also told my mother, and her sisters, that she wasn't going to be much, and prioritized the guy in the household over the kids. And my mother then went to school and was told by teachers you weren't going to be much. Imagine what this does to your self-esteem, And it wasn't a nuclear household. It wasn't mom and dad. Most of my Caucasian friends watching this, middle class, mom and dad is sort of assumed at home. So I wrote this story so that people understand the backstory. That I got lucky because my mother had two choices: pass that legacy of non-love, communicated non-love to your children, communicated low self-esteem to your children, or break the cycle. And so my mother told me she loved me every day of my life. I didn't realize what was happening to me, but there's no question that my self-esteem came from that and her just obsessing about me. Now, my mother did not have successful relationships with men, I think in part because of what she witnessed in her growing up experience, but she poured that love into us. And all of her children have, relatively speaking, are successful. So the story that people can read on Wikipedia, whatever, is easy on me. I did this, I did that, I got that award, whatever. But the backstory really is everything that happened really before I was 10. So I had a sense of yes, I am and yes, I can. My dad, because they owned a business. My mother, because she told me she loved me. Self-esteem and confidence, which I cover in this book in the 5 pillars. That's one of the 5 pillars. And then I had witnessed 2 murders and a death before I was 9 years old. That's in the book. The death of my family's marriage, which was the death of generational wealth, because a divorce breaks up assets and breaks up family spirit. We owned an 8-unit apartment building that we bought for $18,000 in South Central LA. And now people around the world in different stratospheres may think that's a lot of money, but anybody in the US knows that an 8-unit apartment building, you can't get a closet in Los Angeles for 18 grand a day, 180 grand, you can't get a closet. We had a whole 8-unit apartment building for $18,000. Payment was $237 a month or something. And which meant that 5 units were pure profit. You pay rent to pay the mortgage on 2 of the rent units. You lived in the third. We lost it. We lost that because my dad was financially illiterate. He could make it but couldn't keep it. Was too proud to ask my mother for help. My mother was a financial genius, but wasn't respected by my dad in that way. So pride killed. And we owned a gas station. Again, all this is in the book. We lost it all. And so then I saw my uncle get killed when I was 7, the guy who saved my life. And then I saw my best friend get killed, was in the environment. My best friend got killed when I was 9. And so when a banker came to my classroom when I was 9 years old and taught financial literacy, and he's wearing a blue suit and a white shirt and a red tie, white guy, and he's not a detective, he's not a police officer. Arrest me. I'm like, okay, who are you? And I literally asked him, what do you do for a living? And how did you get rich legally? And people who read that or listen to that, they get a chuckle because it's such a weird statement. Mm-hmm. But Becky, I was dead serious. Like there was no 3-story, 2-story buildings in my neighborhood unless it was the courthouse. No one was on a salary. No one had a business card. There were no professionals in my neighborhood unless you were a professional drug addict or a professional drug dealer or, but the professions, you were an hourly worker. And you couldn't do this in the middle of the day. What we're doing right now, my mother couldn't do this in the middle of the day. She was at work, hitting a clock, right? Mm-hmm. So this guy said, I'm a banker and I finance entrepreneurs. I said, sir, I don't know what an entrepreneur is, but if you're financing it and it's legal, I'm going to be one. The very fact, Becky, and I'm finished with the answer to this question, the very fact that I never knew or was taught the word entrepreneur at 9 years old is a sin. It's a sin of education because all wealth, legal wealth in the world comes from small business and entrepreneurship. That's where it comes from. Businesses exist because people like me and you pay taxes. And 90% of all jobs come from the private sector. 100% of all legitimate wealth comes from the private sector, but no one taught us about the private sector. I mean, it's a sin. So that's how my story began, and it goes on. It's in the book. I was homeless, and I was 18, 10 years later, and all. But really, that resiliency that self-love, self-esteem, that resiliency, 3 of those 5 pillars came from that early experience. So I cannot say enough about that to people who are watching this, who have children they're raising, young men and women they're nurturing. What you say to them matters. They're listening to you.
Wow, John, thank you so much. That's incredibly powerful. And there's a lot of comments in the chat about people appreciating your vulnerability and appreciating your sharing the details of your story. And I'm really struck by what you said about your mother, giving you that place to know that you could and that she loved you. So what we want to do now is to take a deep dive in those 5 pillars of success and talk to those who are with us today about the 5 pillars in greater detail for those who may not have been exposed to the book yet.
Yeah, so before you get to the 5 pillars, you have to have the understanding of the 3 mentalities and the 3 roles. The 3 roles of every successful organization are not essential to the conversation, but I might as well throw them in. But the 3 mentalities, this book is about mindset. So the 3 mindsets you have is, and this is global now: surviving mindset, a thriving mindset, and a winning mindset. And when you have places that are in civil war or dealing with civil strife, or you're dealing with a household, dealing with domestic abuse, you have a household like my mother grew up within that wasn't purposefully nurturing, wasn't stable, kids couldn't depend on it. You're always, you got the twitch. You're wondering what's going on. You're always on alert. You got permanent PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You can't create an environment like that. So you're ready, fire, aim. You're in reactive mode. You're in survival mode. So here's the problem. You have probably half of the world who's depressed right now in the COVID world. You probably have 2/3 of the world that's just reacting to what's going on. They're looking at the TV, wondering, how does this inform my next move? And they're feeling paralyzed. Well, that's ready, fire, aim. That's reacting, not responding. And you've become an expert at what you're against. You're screaming at the TV set, not an expert at what you're for. So there are 2 other mindsets. There's a thriving mindset that's basically the middle class. It's a maintenance of standard of living, of way things are, of traditions, of mores. It's all good. Then you got a winning mindset. Those are people who create stuff from nothing. And a winner believed they were a winner before they won anything. And when my mother was telling me she loved me, I love you, I love you, she was creating that ether inside of me of a winner. So I did that. So you need to have, when problems arose, everybody watching this, raising children, mentoring somebody, mentoring yourself, reinventing yourself, you got to have a winning mindset, because this world's going to tell you can't, it's impossible. They're going to say, only crazy people change the world, by the way. People who are perceived to be crazy. They're not crazy. They're in their own lane. They're doing, the world's going here because that's normal, whatever that is, traditional. But this outlier over here is over here doing this crazy thing. And people go, that's nuts, until it's not. And then they end up having this outsized success. You can name the names, Oprah Winfrey for talk shows, Jay-Z for music, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates for TikTok. It goes on and goes on. The five pillars. As much education as you can shove down your throat. Understanding the math. Math is everywhere. And I say math, I don't mean trigonometry or something. I mean math as in financial literacy, as in capitalism, as in how the world works. Like, you can't even run a church without money. You can't run a nonprofit without money. You can't run a government without money. Understanding the math. Number 3, family structure and resiliency. This is the hardest one, by the way, for struggling communities and families to control, but I will come back to that. Number 4, self-esteem and confidence. Those things are different. Self-esteem is how I esteem myself. Confidence is how I take my competence and lean into the world. And then number 5 is role models, and I'll say environment. So why did my Jewish friends succeed so well before and after the Holocaust? Because they had those 5 things before somebody tried to exterminate them in 1939 and 1945. And they had those 5 things after someone failed in exterminating them. And they're continuing to rise in the world because they have those 5 things. You can pick any group, of any race, any place, any space, and you can give them 3 or 4 or 5 of those things, and you see they took off. And you look at groups that have stayed down, and they have 3 or less of those things.
So the dividing line is you have to have at least 3 of those 5 pillars in order to come up from nothing and rise above.
Doesn't matter which 3 you get. You can take I'm just going to mix it up. You take education, self-esteem and confidence, and role models, you win. You take math, education, self-esteem and confidence, you win. You take math, family resiliency, and family structure and resiliency, and throw in role models, you win. You take role models, education, and math, you win. I mean, you can, and because if you do those, if you do 3 things that don't include family structure and resiliency, they actually build resiliency, and you've created a nucleus of a family. You've created a family environment. So we've got what I wanted this book to be is a objective, non-emotional, global role model, something that stands the test of time, that stands up to the greatest cynic, that even the racist wants to read it.
There's an assignment, right? Buy this book and get it into the hands of people who really need to read it most. So, John, I'm wondering if you can share with us how those on the call or others can learn from your story and impart these 5 pillars to others or include them on their journey. And then also, I have a quick question that relates to something you mentioned earlier about 3 roles. So you mentioned the 3 mindsets of surviving, thriving, and winning, but you didn't mention the 3 roles.
Yeah. So the 3 roles are least important of everything I've mentioned. There are other things in the book that'll make you go wow, like what was special about people who came to America in the early 19th and 20th century, what differentiated them from people they left from their, what was the differentiator between the Jews or the Italians or the Africans or the Caribbeans who came to America versus the same Jews and Italians and who stayed wherever they were in their home country. They had a different collection of endorphins going on in their body that drove them here. And I do a little bit of a teaser in the book where I say, racism is real. It's horrible. My friend Stevie Wonder can see racism is real. He doesn't do that joke. He laughs at himself mostly more than anybody else. Racism is real, but if race was the only issue, you would not have Black Caribbeans who succeed and Black Africans who succeed here, but Black Americans succeed less. It's just that everybody who's Black would be just completely tore up professionally the same. The difference is the mindset and the background, the 5 pillars. That's why you have poor whites, Native American Indians, and Blacks, African Americans at the bottom of the economic strata in America today. Notice I mentioned poor whites with that group because they didn't get the tools. They didn't get these 5 pillars from their rich white friends. They got the white title. That's it, and they've been played ever since. In my opinion, this is like a farce that's been played out for 40 years on groups of people, and we're playing this game out. But then you have, Jews, my friends of Jewish descent, religious group, and Native Indians from India, and let's say Jamaicans who are succeeding. Same country. So, and then what do you need in order for a family or group to succeed? These 3 roles. Everybody has played one of these 3 roles: hunter, skinner, and cook. And a skinner is like a preparer. So in a company, at Weaving Influence, somebody's the hunter. Somebody's the preparer, the skinner, the analyst, and somebody's the cook who delivers on the promise of the hunter. You have that in a family, you have that in a government, you have that in a business, nonprofit, doesn't matter where, church. So the roles sort of self-identify once you get the mentality right, you get the 5 pillars right. You can people just emerge in their appropriate role. Like I bought a house, my wife turned it into a home, right? So I was a hunter, but clearly she was the cook, and both are important.
And you need all those roles in order to be successful.
Yeah, without my wife, I've got a huge, beautiful house that's got no soul.
Yeah, that's helpful. So we did have a couple questions in the chat, people asking to restate the 5 pillars. And what I was hoping is that you could share with us how we can apply the 5 pillars and share them with others.
Uh, this is the COVID world we're in. The daughter, like, yeah, that's a nice streaming session, but I got some homework due at 3:00. The five pillars are, again, in no order, but I'm gonna say them in order. As much education as you shove down your throat. Understanding the math. Now, when I say education, I don't mean necessarily proper K through college education. I have a higher education, even though I did not finish college. People may find that hard to believe, but I did not finish traditional college. I got bored, distracted. I was curious. I was ready to get into business. I thought I was being taught something I already knew, whatever my cockiness told me at that time. But I am, as you can see from even my home office, obsessed with learning. And so I've become a lifetime learner. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you listen twice as much as you talk. International travel is education. Getting outside of your small town is education. Talking to somebody who you would not necessarily get along with or understand is education. Listening to that person is even a higher education. I mean, I've sat in sessions with members of the Ku Klux Klan who are trying to burn down my church in South Central LA, trying to understand, why do you want to do this? And ultimately, I learned that it wasn't even personal to me. Why are you in the Klan? My daddy was. Why was your dad in the Klan? His daddy was. Why was your daddy in the Klan? It was what we do. My great-grandfather co-founded the little Klan. Okay, so you don't consciously hate me. Well, I never thought about it that way. I'm just doing what I do. So this is ignorance, really. It's a lack of exposure. It's a lack of education. This is why we have half this country that's high school educated. It's a problem. It's a problem because education is exposure. It brings a light. The more education you have, the more exposure you have, the more enlightened you are, the less ignorance you tend to defend. So redefine education, but define it broadly. And I'll run through the other 3 pretty quickly. Family structure and resiliency, self-esteem and confidence. If I don't like me, I'm not going to like you. If I don't feel good about me, I'm not going to feel good about you. If I don't love me, I don't have a clue how to love you. And here's the big one. If I don't have a purpose in my life, I'm going to make your life a living hell. Whatever goes around, comes around. Charity starts at home, and the most dangerous person in the world is a person with no hope. So if you have half the world, Becky, that are depressed right now, and I believe that is not an unfair number, then what do you have on mindset? Do you have hunters? Do you have survivors? Do you have winners? Do you have believers? Do you have cynics? Do you have, I don't mind you being skeptical, but cynical is to lack hope. When you lack hope, here's danger. Power, money, high confidence because they're competent in something, low self-esteem, same person, low self-esteem, lack of belief, fear. Think about that in the hands of one leader. It's completely, utterly is dangerous. It's dynamite. It's like a hand grenade trying to get into the ground without exploding. We have this all around the world now, and we think it's normal. It's not normal, and you should accept it. You should vote it out of office, and replace it with somebody who has your best interests in heart. And then, of course, that leads to role modeling. But if you get the other 4 right, role model sort of begins to self-manifest, or people model what you see. Like your daughter, clearly you've got enough of a relationship with her. She felt she could come and talk to you without words. You have this simpatico. Well, that has to become normal in every household. That kind of she's not just your daughter, she's your partner, she's your friend, she's an extension of you. And that confidence that has her walk up the steps and step into a frame, that may seem like a simple thing, but most people don't have that confidence. They'll shy away. Is it okay? Am I allowed? It's the little things is what I'm saying. This book is about the little things that define the big things. The tail here actually wags the dog. We've been obsessing about all the wrong things. You're looking for love in all the wrong places. And as a result of that, we got all the wrong results.
So that's really helpful. And I think that thing that's standing out to me right now, John, is that many of us can resonate with what you're saying about just the way people are feeling in our world right now. Um, I'm curious because I know that we talked about this when we were preparing for the webinar about the impact of this message for women particularly. So, knowing that you're a man who wrote the book, what can women learn from you and from this message?
Freedom. Women stick with abusive men as an example, primarily for economic reasons. They feel imprisoned. They feel that they don't have optionality. I hope this book sets them free. Women feel, rightly so, that they're paid less than men in the workplace. That's true. I hope this book sets them free to think about writing checks and not just cashing them. Now, you got to think about that for a minute. What did I just say? I said, don't wait for somebody to give you a check for you to cash. As an employee, maybe you should go start a business, become an employer, where you set the rules and you set the pay rates, and you decide who you hire and who you fire. And that's one of the reasons I launched the 1 Million Black Business Initiative at our Hope Global Forum last week, is to achieve for the Black culture in particular, who has been aggrieved and abused by the country that we love. This country is 450 years old. People are shocked to hear 300 of those years were enslaved, and 75 additional years were Jim Crow, which is commercial slavery. So for everything but 100 years of our history, 75 years of our history, we've been handcuffed. We couldn't get an education. We couldn't get these 5 pillars, not because we didn't want them. They were literally legally denied of us. So the only way you set yourself free today is self-determination. Maybe you get to achieve social justice through wealth creation, through economics and ownership, through setting the standard by creating jobs, not waiting for somebody to go give you one. Maybe we stop obsessing about how somebody else feels about us and start feeling better about ourselves. Let me tell you what, I'm not so much concerned about how you feel about me, Becky. I'm concerned about how I feel about you. In other words, I'm gonna love you whether you love me or not. I'm gonna try to understand you whether you understand me or not, because I start with love for me. But if I don't love me, I can't love you. And no matter how much I want to love you, if you have low self-esteem, you're not gonna love me back. You're gonna resent me. And this is the you have this in families. You don't need to go find strangers to, this happens in families. A guy asked me yesterday for advice. And I said, just stay out of your own way. Mm. Like, he's a really smart guy. Like, you will succeed. I can tell it. The question's not whether it's gonna be good or bad, your story, it's about whether it's gonna be good, better, or best. The difference between better and best and good and bad, Becky, is this is happiness and this is joy. So you can be happy and unjoyful. There's a lot of that in the world. You make money, stay distracted. A lot of the INGs, shopping, drugging, talking, running, distracting, coping. You got a whole bunch of ings, but you're just delaying the inevitable. So you got happiness, you got rich, but you didn't build wealth. You didn't got rich, but once you're joyful, you'll never be unjoyful. You might be unhappy, but you won't be unjoyful. Joy isn't here. I'd rather have that. So the book is it's really whatever people want to get out of it, Becky. If people want a spiritual awakening, there you go. You want financial independence, there you go. You want to get away from an abusive mate, there you go. You want to find another path forward for social justice, there you go. You want to build a city, a country, you want to build a GDP, there you go. I mean, it's remarkably simple.
So I have a question from Jake, and he's wondering in what ways you think we get in our own way and what we should do about it.
Oh my God. That's the question of the century, Jay. Okay. I spend most of my time managing people's insecurities. Sorry, I spend most of my time managing around people's insecurities, their fears, their traditions, their biases, their drama. You know, in the book, I say the story of I walked in with all this enthusiasm, and I was 26. And I told this bank I had this vision, and I got a call, and I got approved for this grant, which was equal to my budget, a whole budget. I was so excited. And then I got to pick up the check, and it's, oh no, this went back to committee. Huh? Translation, you're not getting a dime. And what happened was that somebody in the bank said, this guy's just not real. Well, what do you mean? Wait, no one's that optimistic. No one's that positive. No one's that thoughtful and joyful, and it's got to be a game. So you see what I'm saying? His fears bled back on to me. I had nothing to do with it. So I had to learn that okay, people can't handle 100% of me. I'm gonna give them the 30% they can handle. So I dialed myself back. Women call this. Women have a word for this, which is it's their intuition. So women intuitively know what people they read people. Like a woman will meet a guy, go, oh, he ain't no good. She ain't never met him, but she has a feeling about him because women are terminals to a higher power. So we're creative. There's emotional beings. So I've had to read situations around me because people can only handle 30% of me. I give them 100% of 30% because 30% is all they're going to handle. If I give them 100%, they'll reject me, if that makes any sense, because of their own drama. So there are hand grenades all around you. And if you're insecure, you can't take it. You can't take criticism. If you're full of fear, you cannot take, you take a critique as criticism. You don't hear, I made a mistake. You hear, I am a mistake. You don't hear somebody telling you something, having constructive disagreement with you. You hear an argument. You hear somebody challenging your self-esteem. When somebody has a disagreement with you on politics or whatever, whoever you is, you feel it as an attack on your personal being. So now it's a fight to the death. It's just really somebody disagreeing with your point of view. And you should be able to disagree without being disagreeable. But when you have low self-esteem, it drags everything else down in your life. It colors everything else. You can't even build wealth because you're impatient. People who have low self-esteem want to get rich, get paid. Here's an addiction. I want to get paid. I want to get this money. I want to get this paper. How do I look, you can be a prostitute. You can be a drug dealer and get paid. You can be a gangster and get paid. There's a lot of ways to get paid. That doesn't mean that you're going to build wealth or it's even sustainable. Bad capitalism was slavery. That guy was getting paid, but it didn't build wealth. The richest city in the world in 1840 was Natchez, Mississippi. It's one of the poorest cities in the world today because they got all the stuff we're talking about wrong. But building wealth is what you do in your sleep. And that you can't sleep, you can't rest without peace of mind, peace in spirit, being reasonably comfortable in your own skin. But you build wealth in your sleep. Your education compounds. The rent on the house, the three houses that you own, you're collecting rent overnight. Stocks compound, small businesses compound. You build wealth in compounding, right? You see what I'm saying? So here's my message. Everybody should want to be reasonably comfortable in their own skin. That's the message of this book. That should be your goal and your objective in life. You're going to have days where you feel like you're in a surviving mindset. 2 days you have a thriving mindset. 1 day you have a winning mindset. Okay, you want to have more of the week where you feel like a winner and less when you feel like a bum and a survivor. And that's called progress. You're going to have days where you feel like an eagle. There's a day you feel like a buzzard. The day you feel like a turkey. Turkey's got wings and can't fly. When you feel like a turkey, you're not going to be very supportive of your friend who just got a promotion. You're going to be like, you're going to be unconsciously hating on your friend because you feel like you're not getting what you want. See what I'm saying? Why should anybody promote racism? Why should anybody want Black people to do worse so they can do better? That's just ridiculous. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why should you can't get any wealth by hating on your neighbor? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. So It affects, is a long answer, but your mentality, your way you affect yourself colors how you see the world. To rationalize is to tell rational lies.
Well, that is deep. I think you should say it again. To rationalize, you tell rational lies.
People who are really smart are able to convince themselves of anything. Somehow, an entire population in Germany was snookered by Hitler for 8 years. A guy they put in jail in 1925 as a crackpot, as a nutcase, saluted, and they end up saluting him by name by 1939. How does that happen? How do you kill 6 million people and go? This is your shop. This is your neighbor now. He happens to be Jewish. He was just white yesterday. He had the same suit you had on. His wife had the same dress your wife had on. You talk to each other. Oh, you love their music, whatever they did. But then a year later, it's you Jew. And then 3 years later, is you're the reason I'm a failure? No, maybe you're just not running a good business. I don't know. And then we drag the person out of their house and put them in a concentration. You see what I'm saying? It's like, how does a silent majority say that's okay? Because to rationalize, to tell rational lies. I'll tell you something else. President Bill Clinton told me this. It's hard to get somebody to agree to the truth when the lie is paying their paycheck. There's one for you. It's hard to get somebody to agree to the truth when the lie is paying their paycheck. When the incentives are lined up with your advantage, so this slavery, that made no sense morally, ethically, and I mean anybody who thinks about it for any period of time. But people were getting paid like they were. I mean, it was an incredible wealth generator. It was the largest reverse transfer of wealth probably in modern world history because it built the biggest economy in the world. But it made no sense. It wasn't sustainable. I'd argue that the whole obsession with guns in this country came from that era, because if you were a white family in the middle of nowhere and you had no law enforcement close to you, you secretly thought, if I was these people who I've been treating like this for this long, they may want to come back and get some payback. Now, that's not godly, but it's understandable that they might want some payback. So what do you do? Let me go get some guns. Let me go get a lot of them. We have this obsession to this very day. Guns. Why do you need 5 AK-47s and 3 rifles and a machine gun? I mean, come on. I got guns in the house for protection, but I don't have 50 of them. And I don't have, I think that we're living through our fears, our obsessions, our rationalizations, and this can't be healthy. Disease is dis-ease. Most of the disease is dis-ease. And, we're water, we're energy. What kind of energy are you manifesting? My wife tells me 75% of all disease lives on inflammation. Where does inflammation come from? If you get angry all the time, are you inflamed?
Yeah. So I want to...
This is my next book. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I want to pick up on a question that came into the chat a while ago. And one of our listeners was asking what role faith plays in the mentality or mindset that people adopt.
I think you need to believe. Well, I mean, in this book, I say you got to believe. You got to believe. You believe in yourself, believe in America, believe in Switzerland, wherever you happen to be. You have to believe. Like, the one thing I love about America is you don't have to believe in a king or a queen or royalty or a bloodline or a system. You have to believe in yourself, and that's enough. But I think, so that allows you confidence, that'll give you competence, that'll make you successful in this world, right? But if you don't have self-esteem, if you're not reasonably comfortable in yourself, what is it good for? And so I think that I think it needs to be an inner belief system. And to think that we're here by ourselves and you inhale and exhale somehow because of your own genius, I think it's arrogant and it's probably wrong. And Ambassador Young, who wrote the foreword for this book and is Dr. King's last living senior lieutenant, said this. This is not in the book. This is some bonus content for people. He was a young man and he was trying to figure out his life. And he was conflicted, didn't know what he was here for, what he was here to do. And he went for a run. to try to run it off. And he ran down the hill, and he ran up the hill, and he was exhausted. He had to stop, Becky, because he's just out of breath. The only thing that would stop him is that his body just stopped. He was out of breath. And while he was doing that, he emptied, and he looked up. He couldn't think, he couldn't rationalize, he couldn't blame anybody else, he couldn't complain, he just had to stop. And he saw that the clouds had a purpose, Becky. He saw the plants had a purpose, the rocks had a purpose, the birds had a purpose, everything had a purpose but him. How could that be that everything has a purpose but you? There has to be a purpose that for you, other than you're paying bills and going on vacations and buying a house and getting a car, and there has to be a purpose. And if there's a purpose, then it's a purpose maker. So I don't really care what your religion is. I think religion is just a road you take to what you believe in. I've got every religion here is on this bracelet. And I wear that every day. And 90% of those religions are completely the same. We argue over the 10% that differentiates us, which is silly. But where are we trying to get to? We're trying to get to purpose, being. And we sort of secretly know there's something larger than more important than ourselves. And if you don't, I think you're probably pretty sad. So I think a belief system is important. But I'm more interested in people being spiritual than I am them being religious.
That makes sense. And I love that story about purpose and purpose maker. And a few people are saying in the chat how important that is to them as well. I'm curious about this idea of financial literacy, to go back to the story that you told when you were 9 years old and there was a banker who came into your classroom. As a mom of 3 kids, I haven't heard much or seen much in the education my kids are getting in public schools as it relates to financial literacy. So could you talk for a few minutes about how people can improve on that particular pillar, or what resources exist for people who want to get better at the numbers?
Yeah, you need to write letters to Congress as if your life depends on it. Right after we finish these elections here, this election cycle, you need to write your city council person, your mayor, your state assembly, your state senate, your governor, and your U.S. congressperson and senator with the same letter, encouraging them and do a petition drive. With technology, you can do it online and get folks in your family to sign a petition to make financial literacy the federal policy. Well, by the way, our work made financial literacy the federal policy of this country. With my dumb rear end forgot to ask for money, so it became an unfunded mandate. And you need to make it. Congress mandates that they will pay money to school districts to teach financial literacy. School districts are businesses like anything else, and they don't like teaching stuff that they don't get paid for. I know this sounds shocking, but every school district in America gets between $6,000 and $12,000 per child per year to teach certain things. I don't know if you know this, but the U.S. Department of Education does not create curriculum. They're mandated by law, restricted by law, not to create curriculum. Curriculum is created at the state and local level. All they are is a funding mechanism, Becky. So the U.S. Department of Education inspires school districts to teach because they pay them to do it. And so we need to get Congress to fund financial literacy. It's as important as a driver's license. I mean, we are an economic democracy. You can't even do this. We cannot even do this webinar without having had financial transactions. Somebody's paying for the bandwidth. Somebody's paying for the people who are involved with this, the salaries, the retainers, the devices we're using. It's all around you, but we give it no concern. And to me, it's just offensive to the soul. We're going to have a Monopoly game. Some people started 40 years earlier with a roadmap. And then you tell people who started 40 years later, figure it out for yourself. I mean, it's just cruel to me. And then you wonder why they become drug dealers or gangsters or start stealing stuff. They're like, well, I got to make some money somehow. And you didn't bother to teach me the rules of this game. And so this is how society's created. They don't create it from the top down. They create it from the bottom in. And I tell my rich friends need my poor friends to do better if only to stay rich. My rich friends need my poor friends to do better if only to stay rich. My rich friends need my poor friends to do better if only to stay rich. You need the people at the bottom to believe they can have a ladder to the middle class. The people in the middle class need to believe they can become the winners at the top. And when that bet's off, then America's dream is done. And not just America's dream, democracy around the world begin to crumble. And you start having authoritarian regimes who start forcing their way of life on you. And of course, all those countries are in the crapper. They're not working.
I think
So,
you're referencing another book you wrote right now. Yes?
um, I might be. I mean, I've written 5, but I mean, I just gave you parts of the memo and parts of how the poor can save capitalism. There's probably a large part of Harvard Poor can save capitalism in that. But I've actually, we've weaved ourselves, to use your phrase, into all. I've really walked through the philosophy of the 5 books I wrote and the 1 or 2 I haven't written yet. Um, um, Again, I'm really just framing out a business plan for humanity. Either we live together as brothers and sisters, this is biblical, or we die together as fools. I mean, this is not complicated.
Hmm.
We want to obsess about how somebody wears their hair to school. Huh? What? What about what's in their head? I mean, the person might be the next Tesla founder, but you want to send them home because she's got braids. Well, she's black. Her hair doesn't come down neatly. She needs the braids and stuff. And I mean, it's a different texture, right? I mean, black people. What are you talking about, black people? It's where the sun is direct. Why are people dark in Africa? Because it's hot. I mean, we can have these ridiculous conversations. Why are white people light? Because Europe was cold. Why is your nose narrow? Because the air had to heat your nose before it went into your lungs so you didn't freeze in Europe. Why are black people's nose wide? Because the air had to cool before your lungs before it went in Africa. Why are the hair kinky? So that it doesn't cook the softest part of your body, which is over your brain. I mean, God knew, I say God, a higher power knew what he was doing. Now humanity is out here, we're supposed to be taking care of the small planet, taking care of the least of these God's children, living for something larger than ourselves, and we're arguing over complete stupid stuff at scale. At scale. And then we wonder why things aren't working out for us. We're rearranging the deck chairs of the Titanic, for God's sake. The ship is sinking and we're picking drapes. But I believe in us. And I believe that there's somebody watching this broadcast that's going to take this and go create change on their blog.
Well, and I know that's what you want. We only have a couple of minutes left. So Kelly is going to show us a few ways that people can get to know you and your work more effectively. We have a closing slide. So there are lots of ways to get to know John Hope Bryant and his work, including buying the latest book, Up From Nothing. You can also, Kelly, do we have a slide that has all the links on it or just this one? So if we're just looking at this one. So we're going to put in the chat a whole bunch of different links, a link to buy the book, a link to visit John Hope Bryant's personal website, a link to visit Operation Hope, his organization, to learn more about that. Also a link to the new Marshall Plan, which John Hope Bryant has been talking about throughout today's broadcast. And we hope you'll take the time to get to know John through all the various links, get to know him through his social channels. You can find John on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all the places. We also have a recording of today's session. So many of you mentioned how powerful this session was for you, that you would want to rewatch it. So we hope that you will take the time to share this link with colleagues, friends, neighbors, anyone who needs a burst of inspiration. And we will be sending a follow-up email that includes all the links. So John, I'm going to kick it back to you for some parting inspiration as we wrap up the hour together.
Somebody was asking, what's this contraption behind me? It's my workstation because I'm obsessive. I'm passionate about it. So that's, I can sit here for 12 hours and write a book, or have 3 different work streams that I do at one time. My parting shot is to not restrict your joy and not restrict your bandwidth and not limit your ability to do good at scale. Get caught doing good. Get caught, to quote my friend Chelsea Clinton, get caught doing good. As John Lewis said, you want to get into good trouble. What do you like? What's the point of this life for you? Whoever you are, you're just going to pay your bills and, I don't know, get another car and then die? Or are you going to live a life where the world knew you were here? Don't you want to have a legacy? Don't you want the world to know you were here? That you can be the change that we want to see in this world. It's not going to happen from your president or your governor, or your mayor. You should see, what we're looking at TV, that they're just interested in themselves. So why don't you be the change you want to see in the world? That's what Mother Teresa wasn't a politician. Dr. King wasn't a politician. All the heroes and sheroes, Michael Collins of Ireland, I mean, would go all around the world. none of the people who really changed the world were politicians. You know, what can you do? What can you do, and where can you do it? And how would that make you feel about yourself? And how would that esteem you to your fellow friends and family members and the children who look up to you? That's the question, and that's the charge. And this is your business plan. And buy the book and give it away. Put it in the libraries. Put it in the public schools. Start. What do I want you to do? Have a chat. Create little book clubs. Have conversations. Just have this go through the internet. And talk about the things that matter the most. Let's figure out what we agree on versus what we disagree on for a change. How about let's do that?
It's a great charge. Thanks, John.
My pleasure.